The United States government and a guy going through a midlife crisis are shockingly similar. Except instead of a nasty divorce, overpriced cocktail lounges, and a brand new Corvette, Uncle Sam is blowing trillions on healthcare programs, tanks, and monthly checks for 70 million retirees. And unlike a normal midlife crisis that you fix with therapy, a new gym membership, and one regrettable tattoo you swear has symbolism, this one is different. And that's because we have to live through it year after year. And this spending problem is exactly how we ended up running a nearly $2 trillion deficit. Which means the United States is spending almost $2 trillion more than it brings in annually. We're like a college freshman with a credit card and no concept of consequences. And what do we do when the debt collectors come knocking? Well, we just borrow the difference every single year, which is why the national debt has now exploded over $38 trillion, a number so large it feels made up. So that leaves us with the single biggest question facing America today. Can we actually fix this mess? And after spending over 60 hours in government reports, Excel spreadsheets, and looking at charts that made me question everything, I've come to the conclusion. The only options we actually have left are ugly, unpopular, and guaranteed to piss off millions. But before I just rip the band-aid off and jump straight in, let me give you some context. A deficit happens when the government spends more than it collects. Think of it like an unprofitable business. And the United States has been unprofitable since 2001. And recently, it's gotten dramatically worse. Since 2020, we've been running trillion-dollar deficits every year, like it's our new national pastime. Baseball's out, and fiscal irresponsibility is in. And to explain how the world's strongest economy can be bleeding money annually, we first need to look at where the cash is actually going. This is the part of the video where I'm going to start to dive into the important details. And if any of it feels confusing at first, just stick with me. It'll all make sense by the end. Government spending comes in 3 buckets: mandatory spending, discretionary spending, and net interest. Let's start with the largest one first, mandatory spending. This is the spending that's locked in by law, things like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It's the financial equivalent of your rent. You have to handle it, unless you want serious repercussions. Next up is discretionary spending. This is the spending that Congress chooses yearly. Things like national defense, education, and foreign aid. This is the segment of government spending that politicians love to fight about. And finally, net interest. This is the interest we owe on our existing debt, minus the interest income the government receives. It's not optional, it's not voted on. It's the bill we owe for all the previous bills we didn't pay. And when you add these 3 together, you get the outlays of the federal budget. But here's the real gut punch. Just 5 line items on the federal budget make up nearly 70% of the entire federal budget spending. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, national defense, and interest. Everything else is pocket change relative to these 5 items. So when that one dude on your Instagram feed screams about cutting foreign aid, the truth is, it wouldn't solve any of our problems. And I can show you. In 2024, the US spent $78 billion on foreign aid. Sounds huge, right? Well, it's not. That's actually only about 1% of the federal budget. So let's say we did cut foreign aid to 0. What would this buy us? 19 days of Social Security payments. 19 days. And then we're back to borrowing. So as you can see, line items like foreign aid are not the issue. They're hardly even a rounding error. If we want to get to the root of the deficit spending and debt problem, we have 2 real options. Option 1, cut national defense spending. And option 2, cut mandatory spending, specifically in the forms of Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. That's it. These are the only 2 options we actually have. Everything else is noise that's too small to have any tangible effect on the budget. Because when nearly 70% of your budget is eaten by only 5 giant line items, trying to fix the deficit by trimming around the edges is like trying to lose weight by switching from regular Coke to Diet Coke. It doesn't really matter, because guess what? You're still at McDonald's. So we need to be addressing the root causes of the deficit, not trimming the edges. So let's look at our first option, cutting national defense. National defense spending makes up around $850 billion annually, or 13% of the federal budget. But there's an issue with it. Cut defense spending and people will immediately start imagining paratroopers flying down on their house. It's one of the stickiest political issues, and because of this, cuts to it are highly unlikely. And it's not like we aren't overspending. We absolutely are. The The United States spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined, including China, Russia, Germany, and probably the Avengers at this point. And the reason we spend so much is because national defense is an emotional support blanket wrapped around the entire country. And in a world where global tensions are rising, international affairs are a dumpster fire, and the internet keeps telling us a World War III is around the corner, no elected official wants to be the fall guy who cut defense spending. So yeah, national defense cuts aren't likely to happen. Which leaves us with option 2, cut mandatory spending. And mandatory spending is the Mount Everest of our budget challenges. It's big, it's dangerous, and attacking it will end your career faster than being caught on a certain someone's list.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
And when it comes to mandatory spending, there's 3 categories that are considered the untouchable giants. And they are Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. These 3 combined make up $3 trillion annually, or 44% of the yearly federal budget. So clearly one of these has to be the answer to our deficit problem. And let's start with Social Security. It's the single largest federal program in the United States, with over 70 million people relying on it. And for about half of retirees, it provides more than 50% of their income. And then for about 1/4 of retirees, it makes up more than 90% of their income. So if you cut Social Security benefits, millions of seniors don't just get slightly inconvenienced. They immediately fall into poverty overnight. But here's another gut punch for you. The Social Security Trust Fund is projected to be insolvent by 2034. And when that happens, the Social Security Administration can only pay benefits from ongoing tax income, which essentially means benefits will automatically be cut by 20% whether Congress likes it or not. So even if we do nothing, it still results in program cuts, which is somehow even more terrifying. But the good news is Social Security can be fixed. And here are 2 real changes that could actually move the needle on Social Security. Number 1, lift or eliminate the cap on payroll tax. This tax cap makes it to where individuals only owe Social Security taxes on the first $170,000 of their income. Everything earned above that $170,000 number is not taxed for Social Security, because once again we're finding policy that favors the rich. And if we eliminated this tax cap entirely, about 73% of Social Security's long-term funding shortfalls would be closed, because the share of untaxed earnings has risen from 10% to almost 17.5%, which means we're missing a substantial and growing amount of revenue. And now on to our second option, adjust benefits for high-income retirees. This one's rather simple, so I'll keep it short and sweet. Why are we giving Social Security to someone who earns millions in dividends? That doesn't make much sense to me. Because if someone like Warren Buffett qualifies for Social Security, there's a fundamental issue going on. We need to adjust who qualifies and who doesn't qualify. All this being said, there is good news. Social Security is at least fixable. But the bad news is, it's going to take an individual with some serious balls to get some change in action. So while we wait for that, let's move on to Medicare. Medicare provides health care coverage for more than 65 million Americans, those being mostly seniors. And it makes up about 13% of the federal budget, costing us over $850 billion annually. That's more than the entire GDP of countries like Argentina, Belgium, Sweden, and Ireland. So where's the issue? Well, the Medicare Hospital Insurance Trust Fund is now estimated to be insolvent by 2033. This is the fund that covers inpatient care, nursing facility care, and hospice care. And when insolvency happens, the law states that spending cannot exceed incoming tax revenue after the reserves are exhausted, which essentially translates to automatic benefit cuts of around 11%. So what options do we have to fix this? Well, we can raise the Medicare payroll tax. Right now, the standard Medicare tax rate is a combined 2.9%, split evenly between the employer and employee. And if we raise the tax rate by 1 point, it would raise more than $1 trillion over the next 10 years. But what if we just wanted to tax the rich? Well, increasing the tax rate by 1 point for just the top 4 tax brackets would still raise $300 billion. And I know, taxes are not fun. We all know that. But neither is automatic cuts from insolvency. And another issue that we need to talk about is overpayments. Medicare Advantage is the private version of Medicare. It allows individuals to get their health care coverage through a private company instead of directly from the government. But it has serious problems. The Center for American Progress released data that estimates Medicare Advantage plans are overpaid by 22 to 39% on average, which equals somewhere between $83 to $127 billion annually. Which means without reform, Medicare is at risk of overpaying Medicare Advantage plans between $1 to $2 trillion over the next decade. And while aligning these payments to the real costs would avoid trillions in waste, it would infuriate the health insurance industry, which is why this issue will likely never be fixed. So let's move on to the final giant I'll be covering, Medicaid. Medicaid covers around 70 million Americans, mostly kids, low-income families, disabled adults, and seniors. It's the thing that foots Grandma's $7,200 a month nursing home cost. And it costs the government more than $600 billion annually, making up over 9% of the federal budget. But unlike Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid cannot go insolvent. There is no trust fund to run dry. Instead, Medicaid is financed through a federal and state partnership. The federal government reimburses a share of each state's Medicaid spending, and then the state covers the rest. But we're still spending far more on Medicaid than we should be. And I've got some ideas for actual fixes that could be implemented to have a real impact. And no, I'm not talking about throwing a bunch of struggling and disabled people into the Hunger Games to lower the annual payments. It's actually as simple as just cracking down on Medicaid fraud. Medicaid struggles with improper payments. These are the payments that were made that should not have been made. They're due to things like data errors, overpayments, and eligibility errors. And the total amounts to over 5% of all Medicaid spend being on these errors. And it costs the government tens of billions of dollars per year.
How is this possible?
I've covered some of the fixes that could save the government trillions, but what happens if America just says, screw it? We'll deal with this whole debt thing later. And this is kind of where we are right now, and it leads down a dark road. Since we run an annual deficit, the federal government will have to continue borrowing whatever gap exists between its revenue and its spending. And investors aren't dumb. They know this isn't sustainable. If they see a country borrowing trillions every year with no roadmap to fix their spiraling debt burden, they'll demand a higher return to compensate for the increased risk they see. Which means the interest rate at which the United States borrows will rise. And a higher interest rate means everything gets more expensive. Your mortgage gets more expensive. Your car loan gets more expensive. Your business loan gets more expensive. Your credit card rates get more expensive. Everything will get more expensive. Higher interest rates essentially choke the economy in slow motion. But it's not too late. The United States still has time, a shrinking window, to fix this mess before it's too late. But the longer we wait, the fewer options we have. We must act now. And before this video comes to a close, I want to hear your thoughts. Because the truth is, after spending over 60 hours making this video, I realized something. There is no perfect solution. There are only trade-offs and sacrifices. So drop your ideas in the comments on how we could fix things, and I'll be responding to as many as I can. Because if there's one takeaway from this entire video, it's that doing nothing is not an option.